Hello and welcome to this next module for this MasterClass course on AWS Virtual Private Cloud. In this module, you will be introduced to this essential networking building block within the AWS cloud called Amazon Private Virtual Cloud, or VPC. You will learn about the core components of AWS VPC. It will also go through the functionality and benefits provided by AWS VPC and its components. The learning objectives that you can expect to take away from this module are: first and foremost, you will get familiar with the AWS VPC and its various components of AWS VPC. The first component of VPC we will talk about is the subnet. Then we will discuss the basics of a route table. Moving on to the next component, we will talk about VPC peering connections, and we will also discuss VPC peering use cases. Moving further, you will learn about security groups and network access control list, NACL. And you will also learn what are the differences between security group and network access control list. And last but not the least, we will discuss the purpose and benefits of Internet Gateway. Lots to cover in this module, folks, so let's get started. All right, so now it is time to introduce you guys to the star of this MasterClass course, the AWS VPC. AWS VPC stands for Virtual Private Cloud. It is a virtual private network within AWS Cloud that enables us to launch AWS resources into a virtual network that we've defined. You can think of it as a private cloud or subcloud inside the AWS public cloud. This private cloud is an isolated, logical network which is only accessible to us. It resembles a private data center or a private corporate network, although it has both private and public subnets. Private subnets within an AWS VPC have connectivity only within themselves, within the bounds of their parent VPC, whereas the public subnets do have access to the Internet. AWS VPC has a scalable and flexible architecture. It also has the ability to extend your corporate, home, or on-premises network to the cloud as if these private networks are a part of the cloud network. This means that you can easily expand the capacity of existing on-premises infrastructure and even use this functionality to set up a hybrid cloud for your project. In a traditional networking setup, if you wish to build and deploy your own data center, you need a lot of upfront investment. Most of these investments are of capital expenditure in nature. For instance, purchase and provision the required hardware, acquire the necessary security certifications, hire system administrators for regular maintenance to keep everything up and running. With AWS VPC and AWS services in general, you have to incur a little upfront investment, and moreover, as your business evolves, you can scale the infrastructure up or down as required. More recently, AWS has made changes in their infrastructure in that any new EC2 instances can only be launched inside an AWS VPC. Originally, AWS had the option to launch EC2 instances in a flat classic network. This is a welcome change because it isolates our AWS resources from other AWS users and hence enforces security by default. And since VPC is such a core part of AWS networking, it is all the more reason for you to learn the details of this essential component. Okay, folks, so now we know AWS VPC is a separate isolated network within the AWS public cloud, and AWS VPC is used to host AWS resources for us securely and privately. As a complex network component, AWS VPC requires a number of other subcomponents which function together to deploy our AWS VPC. Let's review what these subcomponents are. Subnet. It is a subnetwork inside an AWS VPC. Route tables are used to control the network traffic inside a subnet. Peering connection can be used to connect one VPC to another. Network ACLs. These specify what type of traffic is allowed inside the subnet. VPN connections, which allows on-premise environments to communicate with your VPC. Security groups, which are used to control the flow of traffic at instance level. Internet gateway. This allows the VPC to communicate with the Internet. Elastic IP. These are static public IPs which can be associated with our EC2 instance deployed within the VPC. Okay, now let's try to visually understand some of the important concepts related to AWS VPC. You already know that AWS infrastructure is composed of AWS regions, which are deployed across various geographic locations around the globe. Within these AWS regions, there are one or more availability zones, which basically are distinct data centers within the AWS region. When you create a VPC, you must specify a range of IPv4 addresses for the VPC in the form of a classless interdomain routing (CIDR) block. For example, 10.0.0.0/16. When you create a VPC, it spans all the availability zones in the region. After creating a VPC, you can add one or more subnets in each availability zone. When you create a subnet, you specify the CIDR block for the subnet, which is a subset of the VPC CIDR block. Each subnet must reside entirely within one availability zone and cannot span multiple availability zones. Now let's take a deeper look at AWS VPC within our AWS Management Console. Now here we are in our AWS Management Console, and we have navigated into our AWS VPC dashboard. The VPC dashboard is available in AWS Service under Networking category. As we discussed, AWS's global infrastructure is spread across multiple geographical regions called AWS regions. Within the AWS regions, there are distinct data centers called availability zones. Availability zones are distinct locations that are engineered to be isolated from failures in other availability zones. And we also discussed that AWS VPC is a region-based service. In this VPC dashboard, we have this navigation panel where we have links to various subsections of this VPC dashboard. There are options like your VPCs, subnets, route tables, internet gateways, elastic IPs, endpoints, NAT gateways, peering connections, etc. Next section is related to security components within the context of AWS VPC. This section contains links to network ACLs, security groups. This is followed by VPN components, which are customer gateways, virtual private gateways, and VPN connections. Now let's have a look at each of these components. First and foremost, let us navigate to your VPCs in the navigation pane. As we can see, this leads us to a listing of our VPCs which have been deployed in this AWS region within our AWS account. Each of these VPCs has a name and VPC ID. We will use this information to identify the components that are associated with our VPC.